Hello, everyone, wherever you are. Welcome to the SGS Inspire podcast series with me, Lucky Nurafiatin. I am a market analyst for Asia Pacific region. In this episode on hydrogen in transport, I have Mr. Salah Mahdy from Howden and my colleague Dhanisha Juleemun. Hello, Salah and Dhanisha. Welcome to Inspiring Energy Talks.
Hi, Lucky. Thank you very
Hi.
much.
Hi.
Hi, Lucky.
Um, hey. So let me introduce Salah to our listeners first. Salah is the Global Director for Renewable Hydrogen at Howden. With more than 20 years of professional experience, Salah has delivered high-profile green and blue hydrogen as well as ammonia projects and studies. Under his leadership, Howden's advanced hydrogen compression solutions have been selected to be in the heart of key projects for the global energy transition, including the world's first green steel plant, the largest hydrogen refueling station, the first e-fuels plant, the first container vessel operating on carbon neutral fuel, and Europe's first hydrogen underground storage project. Salah holds a master's degree in chemical engineering and a master's degree in business administration. Prior to joining Howden, Salah held senior business and engineering positions in global companies such as Worley, Honeywell UOP, AspenTech, and IT Empower. Thank you for being here, Salah.
Thank you very much, Lucky.
And as I mentioned earlier, we also have Dhanisha Juleemun with us. Dhanisha is a market analyst for Europe and Africa at SGS Inspire. Her expertise is focused on the global fuel product development for both diesel and gasoline vehicles, as well as forecasting the trend for new technologies in the energy sector. She has 8 years' experience working in product development for fuels and lubricants, analyzing vehicle park to design engine test, assessing new additive chemistries, new trend in engine technology, and fuel compositions. She holds a master's degree in chemistry and holds a chartership status (CChem) by the Royal Society of Chemistry. Prior to joining SGS Inspire, Dhanisha was a technology analyst at BP. So welcome to you also, Dhanisha. How are you
Thank
all?
you. Thank you, Lucky. Great. How are you both?
Yeah,
I'm
great,
fine,
great.
thank you.
Thank
It's
you.
great and sunny in Singapore. And how are you, Salah?
Yeah, great. Lucky, thank you very much. Yeah, it's not sunny here, cloudy, a little bit raining, but yeah, typical British weather.
Yeah, I mean, in Singapore, it has been raining for the past few days from Saturday to what today is now is Thursday.
Friday.
Oh, Friday. Yeah, but now today is quite hot. So, in the past few years, the development of hydrogen fuel and hydrogen fuel cell vehicles has been growing exponentially. I think we all feel that. So, I remember that was sometime in 2014 when the first hydrogen powered fuel cell vehicle was commercially launched and sold on the market. That was started in Japan. That time, I think hydrogen refueling station was scarce and still is now too, actually, but much better than 2014, obviously. So, Salah, what is your company's involvement in the development of hydrogen as fuel for vehicles? Or you may start with explaining what Howden is doing in hydrogen.
Yeah, absolutely, Lucky. I mean, first of all, when we look into the ecosystem of the hydrogen refueling system, it consists of number of key technologies. Um, First of all, and definitely the water electrolysis technologies that produce the green hydrogen at roughly pressure levels, anything from 1 to 30 bar. But then there is another key step that usually need to be done, which is actually increasing the pressure of the produced hydrogen to the levels that the fuel cell electric vehicles need, which is, could be 350, 700 bars so far, depending on the type of the vehicle. And this is basically where we need the what we can call the second major technology in the ecosystem, which is the compression. And this is where Howden actually plays. Howden is a leading global provider of mission-critical air and gas handling solutions and products. But in particular, and for the hydrogen market, Howden is one of the world's leading suppliers for the hydrogen compression solutions with over 100 years of experience in this field. For example, one of the major compression technology in this space, in the hydrogen refueling space, nowadays is what we call the diaphragm compression technology. I would say the vast majority of the hydrogen refueling stations around the world uses this technology. This technology actually is a technology that Howden invented 100 years ago. And today, Howden technologies sit in the heart, as for the key examples that you kindly gave, Lucky, in the beginning of the interview, that the list of the projects that we did actually include, talking about the mobility, for example, the world's largest hydrogen refueling station that Howden supplied the compression solution to in 2021 in China. And
sorry, where? In China.
Yeah. And we have been actually supplying compression solutions to larger number of hydrogen refueling stations in different parts of the world, including definitely again China, Europe, as well as New Zealand as well. So I've been actually busy in this space, especially in the last 2 years, as you mentioned. The cadence that has been created for the hydrogen space, especially in the last 2 years, is really exceptional, and we see now it is actually going even to move up in the next few years. And our technologies have been actually supporting a number of key projects around the world, not just limited to the mobility sector. But again, as you mentioned, the world's first green steel project in Sweden, the world's first e-fuel plant in Chile. So mix really of key projects where proudly Howden Technologies have been actually selected to support these projects around the world.
When you said about the largest hydrogen refueling station in China, how big that you say the largest? Can you explain a little bit more?
Yeah. So far, the largest hydrogen refueling station is the one high power actually built in China. Roughly, it produces around 4.85 tons of hydrogen tons per day. And this
is it in operational?
Yes, indeed, it is. I mean, they commissioned the station last year. Definitely, there are issues around getting the right amount of buses and vehicles, actually. But I think it was really a good step in the country to demonstrate their ability actually to build something actually that work. In China itself, they have a very large number of hydrogen refueling stations. And I think this will help in accelerating the growth in this sector in China as well.
Okay, interesting to see, the development of hydrogen, of which like probably a decade back we never really. I mean, we know some trials and everything, but we didn't really think that it will, kind of growing exponentially like this, especially in the past 2 years when kind of government started to having the 2050 net zero carbon emissions in every places in every country. So at present, it seems that there are two poles in the development of electric vehicles. For example, one, the battery electric vehicles and hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicles, because at the end of the day, actually both run the engine on the electricity. It's just the source of electricity different. Do you think they are the competitor or complementary to each other?
No, I don't believe actually that they are competitors. I think, each of these technologies has their own strengths and weaknesses as well. I do believe that actually each one of them actually will have a space in the mobility market that they will play, and they fit actually better than the other. For example, the battery, from my perspective, can work very well for the short distance trips, for the light vehicles. However, I believe it will have lots of challenges for the long the longer distance trips, as well as also the heavy vehicles. And this is basically because then, you would need much huge batteries in terms of the size and the weight
Okay.
as well.
Mm, mm,
But on top of this, also the charging time is one of the key challenges for the battery electric vehicles as well, compared to the hydrogen fuel cell electrical vehicles. Compared 45 minutes
mm,
versus 4 to 10 minutes by maximum the hydrogen. It
mm.
is expected also to improve in the next few years. However, also they have good advantage with basically that you can charge your car anywhere, at home,
Uh,
at charging points, and this is a big advantage over the hydrogen fuel cell electrical vehicles.
mm. So, but probably like you mentioned just now, the commercial side, they cannot wait, especially like logistic trucks and everything, you cannot wait to charge, like idle for quite 45 minutes, for example, like you mentioned earlier, because it's a loss in revenue for them, right?
Absolutely, and this is why I think we can definitely, both technologies can be
Mm,
considered complementary rather than really competitive
mm.
for this reason. Absolutely.
Actually, I kind of agree with you as well on that. Now I have some question for you both actually. So in the past few months, we saw another development on hydrogen. Some companies are automotive companies, I mean, are developing the use of hydrogen fuel in the internal combustion engine, or we call it ICE. So what's your view on this? Maybe who want to speak first?
Maybe Denisha, you can start.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think it's great. I think it's great that companies are investing in new technologies for hydrogen in the transport sector. Um, I think there's been a good momentum for fuel cells EVs recently, and as a contender for zero emission vehicles by tailpipe. But FCEVs also have their own limitations in terms of lack of infrastructure, or the heavy weight of the fuel cell, or availability of precious metal for the production of the FCEVs. So to develop and investigate new technologies and see if they work in practice is great. But of course, hydrogen ICE engines also have their own constraints currently. But I think it could be further developed or optimized. I mean, let's not forget that space rockets uses hydrogen combustion to take off. I think it could work for aircrafts or big engines, like in heavy-duty vehicles. But obviously, there's more developments to be done.
Okay. Thanks, Danisha. And what do you think, Shala?
I mean, first of all, I would like to echo what you said. Like a few minutes ago about the significant
Mm,
escalation happened in the growth in this market. I remember, not to be honest, 10 years ago, just 5 years or 6 years ago. I remember when I was actually leading the build of the what used to be the largest hydrogen refueling station in UK, and one of the largest hydrogen refueling station in Europe back in 2018. At that time, the size of the station was like 3 megawatt, producing roughly one
mm,
ton of hydrogen. And at that time, if you asked me, and I'm a very optimistic guy, really. Okay, if you asked me at that time, what would be your expectation for the largest size
mm,
a hydrogen production, green hydrogen production plant could actually do, not necessarily just on the hydrogen refueling stations, I would say maybe in 5 years, 10, 20.
mm,
Okay, But when you see actually what happened today, I mean, companies like Shell announced that they will build a 200 megawatt, green hydrogen project in the Netherlands. Sinopec in China announced another 250 megawatt of equivalent to green hydrogen in China. So things actually is moving very fast, as you said, especially in the last 18 months or so. Unfortunately, because of different things, but on top of everything, definitely unfortunately the war in Ukraine, and now the story started from looking at the hydrogen as an effective tool to fight the climate change, but now also this is changed. On top of this, now we look at the hydrogen as an effective tool to achieve the energy security that became really an important thing for lots of countries. And this has pushed everything in a very significant way. Not just the size of the projects, as I mentioned, but also the technology developments across different parts in the hydrogen ecosystem. The electrolyzers, moving from the alkaline to the PEM to the solid oxide electrolyzers and other technologies coming. The same for the storage, the same the compression. I think we can apply the same also for the example that you mentioned, the internal, using the hydrogen as a fuel for the internal combustion engines. I think it is, with no doubt, is still a relatively new development, as it is still in the early stages of research and development. However, I believe once the right technology in this space has been developed, I'm a big believer that this will be a game changer. The reason behind this is that there are so many advantages that we can think of coming from this step. The advantage that the ICE has over the fuel cell. First of all, the simplicity. I mean, remember the internal combustion engines are widely used and well understood technology. The efficiency of the internal combustion engines are generally more or better than the fuel cells, and still, definitely there is a longer journey, but it is expected to be a big advantage for this technology, as well as also the cost. Fuel cells so far is quite expensive. Again, it will take time really to cut the cost down. But this also expected to be a big advantage to the ICEs. However, as I mentioned, it will really take some time actually to see something actually coming from the research and development use that we heard in the market.
Yeah. So what do you think will be more popular? I mean, the FCEV or hydrogen ICE? I know it's still too far to probably too early to say, but which one do you think will become more popular? Because it seems like it's, from the automotive point of view, it's kind of competing between the hydrogen ICE and the hydrogen fuel cell vehicles.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult, definitely, to predict the future and which technology will ultimately take the lead. But being realistic, I think definitely for the short, medium term, the fuel cells will definitely be in the lead and will stay in the lead. But later, the hydrogen internal combustion engines. This is what I hope, because of, as I mentioned, believing in the advantages that I mentioned. But this will take really some time to happen. But in the mobility sector, I'm confident that later the combustion engines, the internal combustion engines, at a certain point will take the lead. But as I mentioned, in particular in the transportation or the mobility sector. Having said that, we can't actually forget that there is a need for the fuel cell in other sectors that actually the internal combustion engines actually cannot serve, like, for example, the power generation as well.
Generations, yeah. Dhanisha, what do you think? Do you agree with what Salah said?
Yes, yeah, I think, the technology readiness level of FCVs is much higher than hydrogen ICE. And by this, I mean several vehicle manufacturers have announced the scale-up production of FCVs, so their technology readiness level is close to commercialization, whereas hydrogen ICE are still at an early stage of development.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a lot of examples. For example, Deutz AG, a German engine manufacturer, has
Mm-hmm.
launched a six-cylinder engine in August 2021, and they pilot tested it in power generation, as Salah was saying, in early 2022. And I think if it works, according to the announcement, if it works, they will expand to off-road application in 2024 and later to heavy duty as infrastructure is built. Most recently, Scania has announced partnership with Westport, and they are looking at a hydrogen high-pressure direct injection fuel system. And it's so far the testing and the result shows that it passes the NOx emission and the exhaust emission requirement in Euro 7 or EPA 27. And also it seems that the concept doesn't need a lot of redesign of the engine. So for example, external gas exchange system, after treatment, crankcase ventilation. So in a way, they're applying kind of this technology, in existing, technology, but using zero carbon fuel.
Mm-hmm.
And also, what's interesting also that I've seen is Renault has announced a concept car, which is a hybrid vehicle, which has both,
Hydrogen and
fuel cell
conventional fuel.
and
Oh,
ice. Yeah, they have both. So,
interesting.
everyone is trying different technologies and see how they can tailor it and optimize it. But obviously, it's too early to say which one is going to be more popular. But so far, as Salah was mentioning, it's probably SCEVs that we see more kind of being closer to commercialization. But I think it gives opportunities and it's create this competition, but for the better, and customers can then choose what makes sense for them.
Yeah. Well, FCV is already commercialized anyway now. I mean, we can purchase. The problem with that is it's expensive. FCV vehicles is really expensive. So I think that's probably one of the reason why the automotive manufacturers also look into developing hydrogen ICE because of the FCV expensive. But I don't know with the engine change, kind probably because of the fuel change. Typically, you need to change all those fuel system in in the ICE itself. So I don't know about the price later on. Maybe we can see the price of those two types of hydrogen vehicles, right? As the fuel for vehicles, so is it the hydrogen for FCV and hydrogen for ICE? Is it the same? Maybe Salah can explain more. Is it the same or is it different? What is it?
I mean, in principle, I mean, hydrogen, is the same fuel in both cases, right? The difference is basically how the two technologies produce or generate the power that the vehicle actually needs basically to run. I mean, in the major difference is that in the hydrogen ICE, internal combustion engines, that they work similarly basically to to the traditional, let us say, gasoline internal combustion engine, where the hydrogen is stored at high pressure tanks and then fed into the engine through the intake manifold, and then once inside the engine the hydrogen is mixed with the air, and then the same process, it is compressed by piston, and then the compressed hydrogen air mixture is basically ignited by a spark plug. This is exactly the process. This causing definitely the controlled explosion, or can call the combustion, which in principle powers the engine. But on the other hand, the hydrogen fuel cell is a little bit more complicated, I would say. because basically the hydrogen fuel cell is an electromechanical device that converts the hydrogen and the oxygen into water, basically producing the electricity from this process, and then in the second step, the electricity generated by the fuel cell can be again used to power
To run the
an
engine.
electrical motor or even charge a battery. With that being said, I think, as I mentioned, both technologies in principle produce zero emissions. As you know, the only, as we know, the only byproduct from both actually
Yeah.
is water.
Yeah. Um, is there any possibility to have liquid hydrogen used as fuel? I know probably because it may require more pressure or high pressure to make it I mean, or cryogenic probably. But do they use liquid hydrogen as fuel?
Yeah, happy to take also the question. I mean, the application for a liquid hydrogen definitely will have a room in the story of the hydrogen in general. Especially, there are certain applications, I would say, that are hard actually to be decarbonized using the gaseous hydrogen. Even within the mobility side, if we can, sorry, the transportation sector, you know, gaseous hydrogen potentially not a good option for the aviation, not a good option
Yeah.
potentially
Yeah.
for the vessel, for the ships. So there are lots of limitations and the challenges that will face the gaseous hydrogen if we decided to use it again to decarbonize these sectors. And at this point, the liquid hydrogen definitely can offer a big advantage, which is again the fact that we can get higher volumes of energy from the
Correct.
same volume
Yeah.
of hydrogen. This is really how I see it.
Okay. In terms of when we speak about mobility, obviously we need to understand a little bit more about the hydrogen refueling stations, right? Because you
Yeah.
need to refuel. Any differences between stations selling hydrogen for FCV and for ICE? Will there be any differences between those two? And kind of which one is more expensive to build? Because I know that hydrogen refueling station is a little bit high, need high capex, capital investment, capital expenditure. So can you explain a bit on that?
I think that first of all, there are definitely differences between the stations themselves. We have to understand, actually, we have to first understand the differences between the two types of the stations, right? And this will tell us, how we're going to actually sell them. And, for definitely when we think about the differences in the both technologies, we can definitely predict that this will have a reflect on the refueling stations themselves. A few examples could be the fueling or refueling pressure. As I mentioned, the full electrical vehicles typically require higher fueling pressure than the hydrogen internal combustion engine vehicles. So the dispensing equipment in the hydrogen refueling station for both will be different. So this is
Okay.
a
Okay.
key thing. On the other side, also the refueling time. The fuel cell electrical vehicles typically, or potentially, let us say, will have a larger fuel tanks than the hydrogen internal combustion engine vehicles. So the fueling time as well is longer for the fuel cell. So this also will have an impact on the design of the of the hydrogen refueling stations and eventually selling them. And for both reasons, there will be a different differences on the design of the refueling nozzles as well. And eventually, all of what I have said so far, definitely in total, will have an impact on the overall cost of the hydrogen refueling stations in both cases. But of course, as I mentioned, so far there is no hydrogen station for the internal combustion engine vehicles that have been commercialized yet.
Correct.
So as I mentioned, those are the potential major differences that will influence the selling of these kind of stations in the near future.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. Let's talk a little bit about the market, I think. So
Yeah.
the world typically makes a reference to Europe. I mean, because Europe most advanced in the emission and vehicle front compared with any other region. So Dhanisha, could you tell us what is the current situation of hydrogen fuel in the transportation sector in Europe?
I mean, in Europe, in terms of regulation, there are a few legislations which have been proposed as part of the Fit for 55 in 2021, which directly or indirectly promotes hydrogen fuel in transport sector. I mean, if we start, the revision of the carbon dioxide emission standard for cars and vans have been agreed. Essentially, by 2035, new cars and vans should reduce their carbon dioxide emissions by 100% compared to 2021, which favors obviously the adoption of zero emission vehicles by tailpipe, for example, the FCVs or battery electric vehicles. In terms of the Renewable Energy Directive, so the RED III, which has been revised, there's a target for renewable fuels from non-biological origins. By this, I mean any gaseous fuels or liquid fuels which are derived from renewable sources other than bio sources. So the mandatory target for the share of RF and BOs, so you can take it as e-fuels, is another terminology used, is 2.6% by 2030 in transport. But this target has been further increased with the Repower EU strategy, which was announced to reduce Russian fuel dependency, and increase renewable energy. And then there's a few more, like for example, in the aviation sector, so there is a SAF mandate, and from January 2030, about 5% of SAF is required. So by SAF, I mean sustainable aviation fuel. And 5% of SAF needs to be blended in jet fuels, of which 0.7% is coming from synthetic aviation fuel. And by this, I mean RF and BOs. This is what it is. But in recent negotiations, this target can come as early as 2025 instead of 2030. In marine, there are new limits for GHG intensity reduction factors for energy used on ship, and it set new rules for ships to use onshore power supplies with zero emission onboard technology. In recent negotiations, again, there was proposal to use at least 2% of yearly energy on board a ship must come from RF and BOs. There is also the Energy Taxation Directive, which clearly apply lower tax duty on hydrogen, be it grey, blue, green, compared to fossil fuel like diesel, gasoline. From 2030 to 2033. After 2033, green electricity will be the one with the lowest tax. And then you have the alternative fuels infrastructure regulation, which has targets for hydrogen infrastructure in Europe as from December 2030. So clearly, hydrogen is being promoted in the transport sector from a regulatory point of view. But from our latest analysis that SGS Inspire has done, Germany has the highest number of FCEVs in the Europe region, and the highest number of refueling stations as well. So we expect growth in other countries as all these legislation that I've mentioned kind of get agreed and comes into force. Also, we see a lot of companies, as we talked, which have announced ambitious projects of production of hydrogen. and we see a lot of models for FCEVs in the heavy duty sector or light duty that's coming. I mean, there are also trials in jet engine fuel by hydrogen. For example, Rolls-Royce together with EasyJet have pilot tested it. I mean, in the marine sector, the use of ammonia and methanol, which is other forms of hydrogens, are being used in ferries or ships in the Scandinavian countries. So I think as success is being seen in those areas, it will be adopted elsewhere.
It's interesting that you mentioned about the rainbow of hydrogen just now, the gray, blue, green. Hydrogen that is produced by conventional technology emits lots of CO2. So the common agreement within the industry is that unless it uses green hydrogen, the use of hydrogen as fuel for vehicles at this time is deemed as worse for the environment, especially when it's gray or hydrogen, right? So do you agree with that sentence? And if you agree or if you don't agree, why? Maybe let's start with Salah.
Yeah, I think yes, the statement is definitely accurate. As you said, the conventional hydrogen production methods, such as the steam methane reforming, or what we call the SMR, involves the use of natural gas as a feedstock in the first place to that actually do result in significant CO2 emissions. Therefore, if the hydrogen it produced these kind of methods, absolutely it is not considered to be a clean fuel. While definitely the green hydrogen is produced through the electrolysis of water using the renewable energy sources, as we all know, such as as just examples, the wind and solar power. This method of production results in no CO2 emissions, making it a truly clean and sustainable fuel. Thus, I believe that the green hydrogen is what should we focus on and use to decarbonize the different industrial applications as an effective tool, as I mentioned earlier, to fight the climate change. Yeah, we understand that there is a transition. This is why we call it actually energy transition. Nothing can happen actually between a day and night, and this is, I believe, one of the reasons why a room has been left for different things, because so far, as a matter of fact, we do not have the most advanced technologies to produce a cost-effective green hydrogen. Again, from the available technology, from the technologies available in the market, until we get there, to get this point, there is a room for other things to play within the hydrogen story. The blue, hydrogen. There is definitely a room until we get to this point. And for the e-fuels, as Dhanisha said, especially in different sectors that actually will be hard to use the hydrogen in.
Dhanisha, do you have any opinion on this?
I think I agree with what Salah said. Yeah, I mean, obviously we want green hydrogen. This is the one that would help decarbonize and bring down GHG emissions. But yeah, we are through a phase, and it doesn't happen overnight, and that's why there's so many colors going on. Yes. So yeah, there is a lot of push for green hydrogen, even as I mentioned before, like the Repower EU strategy that Europe has announced. They are pushing for by 2030, which, by the way, is only 7 years ago, 7 years ahead.
7 years, yeah.
They want to import 10 million tons of green hydrogen from import from other places, North Africa, US, Chile, but also produce 10 million tons in the region. So there are high targets. So we hope that there's more investment going on and for the scaling of that.
But electrolysis using water, right? You need to split between the water H2O become H2, which is hydrogen and oxygen. personally speaking, water is such a precious commodity. A lot of countries actually they don't even have access to the clean water or limited access to the clean water, and they build desalination plants to, process seawater into fresh water that can use. With this green hydrogen development, which uses water, there may be an issue of fresh water versus fuel in the future. Like, when it was biofuel at the start, they said of food, or maybe it's still the issue of food versus fuel. So, do you think it will be an issue later about fresh water versus fuel? It is the question is for both of you.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I mean, in principle, let us put it this: I agree that the production of green hydrogen using water as the main feedstock does indeed raise concerns about the potential competition of fresh fresh water resources.
Mm.
And indeed, while water is abundant on Earth, it is not always easily accessible in certain
Yes.
regions and in many countries, definitely, and many countries have limited access to clean water around the world. However, also at the same time, it is worth noting that the scientists and researchers are working on the development of new technologies that use saline water, brackish water as feedstocks. Still longer journey to get to the point that we can say, okay, we can commercialize this, but I think it will help to minimize the risk at a certain point in the future. This can actually or would reduce the strain on the freshwater resources.
Mm.
Additionally, and for me, this is the most important as well, there is the efficiency of the water electrolysis process is also increasing. There is a massive or significant difference between what we have today and what we had 10 years ago, and this is expected actually to grow. So reducing the amount of water needed to produce the same amount of hydrogen is a key thing in the development that lots of companies actually are doing. And this development of new technologies is what can actually help in reducing the water processed in this production processes, and can help eventually to mitigate the issue and help to manage the water resources I would say, in a more sustainable way in principle.
Dhanisha, maybe do you have any idea or input on
So
this?
yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking what Salah was saying, but I've seen a IEA report which highlights that water requirement for green hydrogen is stoichiometrically 9 liters of water per kilograms of hydrogen produced, and it's much higher than steam natural gas reforming, which is 1.5 liters of water per kg of hydrogen produced. However, for green hydrogen production, the total amount of water that's required can add up to 60 to 95 kilograms per hydrogen produced. When you consider, the cooling of electrolyzers, compressors, water disposal, and for natural gas reforming, it's between 18 to 44 liters. So yeah, I mean, it's quite significant if you're aiming to produce millions of tons of green hydrogen.
Exactly. Yeah.
So to prevent a similar debate from arising for fresh water versus fuel in regions where water is scarce, I think it makes sense. It's in theory, it makes sense to use renewable electricity directly that's been produced from wind or solar energy, but in practice, it's a different story. We see hydrogen projects in North Africa, in Middle East for export, and these regions are the ones where fresh water is scarce. So maybe this debate will come up eventually, just like biofuel did,
Yes.
where a category came later on with the indirect land use change. So these are emissions caused indirectly by destroying natural resources, with natural forest for growth of feedstock for biofuels. So for hydrogen, there might be instead indirect
Water.
use change, you know? So I think a more holistic and integrated circular approach is required for hydrogen production projects at early stages when they're planned. I mean, but it's really optimistic to hear that, and great to hear from Salah that, you know, there are new technologies looking at how to minimize the water use. So yeah, we'll see. I mean, it's really interesting when you deep into the details.
Can Salah, maybe, is there any possibility to use wastewater instead?
No, absolutely. So lots of different types of water, as the examples that I mentioned, include also the wastewater streams can be used. And I know myself, actually, not just the major water electrolyzers suppliers, actually, that they are working this, but also good number of new startups company have actually built the technology based on using the wastewater. And I know myself,
I see.
actually, a couple of them that had actually have been working on this, and especially in the last 12 months achieved some significant, I would say, success in increasing a little bit the efficiency of these kind of electrolyzers that uses, as you said, the wastewater as the main feedstock for the process. And I think, you know, if these technologies manage to actually to increase the efficiencies of these technologies, I think the issue will turn from being you know, a challenge, a risk that this industry actually brings, into, to be honest, an opportunity. You know, because we all know, you know, the massive volumes of wastewaters coming from different parts of the world, and if
Correct.
we can actually make a good use of it to produce, you know, a fuel like the green hydrogen, this, as I mentioned, will turn the whole thing from being a challenge into, or a risk, into a big opportunity.
Yeah, solving two problems at one go.
Yeah.
That's cool. However, I never seen, you know, a debate on the water versus fuel in publications, or some, like, unlike the food versus fuel, which is you can find everywhere. But I have never seen the debate on the water versus fuel. Oh, have you encountered one? Um, Salah, maybe?
I mean, in general, the discussion of water versus fuel in relation to the green hydrogen production has been addressed in various publications and research studies. Maybe not so many, but you know, I have seen regularly people asking the question in many events, conferences, and meetings. And to be honest, I mean, from my perspective, I see this a very healthy discussion, by the way. It is good, really, to pick things like this um, in this early phase of developing the industry. I think this, you know, putting this in the picture, in the front lines, will help really to ensure that the, you know, the major companies, the industry leaders, as well as also the policy makers, will consider the potential challenges coming from this side, or from this issue, and carefully plan and implement the development of the overall hydrogen economy in a more sustainable and reasonable manner. So I see not just the water, but I know lots of people questioning, actually, lots of pieces across the hydrogen economy, including cost, including water, including our ability actually to develop more advanced technologies. And as I mentioned, I take it really positively. I think all of these, you know, discussions, questions will help really to guide the hydrogen economy and hydrogen industry into the right path.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you as well. Let's say in 5 years' time, it's just a little take a peek into the future. um, in 5 years' time, what do you see on the development of the hydrogen fuel? 5 years' times mean 2028, 2028, 2030. Um, how do you see the use of hydrogen as fuel in both FCE and ICE in 5 years' time? Do you think it will be? I mean, policy is one side, but markets sometimes react differently also with the policy, right? So, what
Yeah.
do you see in terms of the market development on the use of hydrogen as fuel in both FCE and ICE?
Yeah, I mean, in general, as you said, this depends on variety of factors, such as the technological developments, the government policies and regulations, and as you said, the market demand as well.
Mm,
However, all I can say is that based on the current trends and developments, I'm sure that the use of hydrogen as a fuel will continue actually to grow in the next 5 years. I think Denisha gave some good examples of some policies, regulations that
mhm,
will expect it actually to push the use of hydrogen as a fuel. Maybe one actually thing I can add in top of what Denisha said is, the what actually proposed from the European Commission last year to ban the internal combustion engine that produces CO2 by 2035. So,
mm,
definitely the business knows that there is no room for anything in the future except potentially the battery electric vehicles, or the hydrogen internal combustion engines vehicles as well. So that means that we are now creating more room and strengthening the potential future for the hydrogen. So the growth of the fuel cell vehicles is expected to increase as more manufacturers are investing in the development of this technology, and the governments around the world are providing financial even incentives to support this industry. The number also of the hydrogen refueling stations is expected to increase for this reason,
mm,
which will make it easier for the owners of the hydrogen fuel cell vehicles, or at a certain time also the hydrogen ICEs, to refuel their vehicles, and this will encourage more to come to this market.
mm,
But to be clear, while again I'm very optimistic, but definitely the rate of growth of this business and the specific technologies that will dominate the market, let us say, um, it is difficult to predict, but it will depend on several factors, as I mentioned. But again, I'm very optimistic about the future of this industry, as and the as the whole story is not driven actually from the business. The whole story of the hydrogen or using a clean fuel came from the fact that the climate change is happening, and I think um, the hydrogen has been offered itself, as I mentioned earlier in the call, as an effective tool, can help us actually in accelerating our journey of the fighting to the climate change, and creating a sustainable and a clean, healthy future for the next generations. I think this is their rights actually for us to do now.
mm, mm. I think discussion is really really good, and we can keep talking about this and discussing it for days probably. Unfortunately, we don't have time, but um, I really think that we are in an exciting time for new developments and innovation on how the future transportation will be, which is, as of now, we will have a lot of kind of, there's no one transportation mode kind of. I think it's difficult to find only one fuel in the future. So it's really exciting time to see what or how it will be later on. Personally speaking, I think unlike the current situation where we mostly use one type of fuel, either gasoline or diesel, in the future, and engine also only one ICE engine as of today. But in the future, we may see many types of fuel and engines will be used. That's just what I personally think. So I kind of hope that our decarbonization efforts uh, to fight the climate change will not leave behind unintended consequences that our next generations needs to solve. So that's that. I hope sincerely like that. So thank you very much to both of you for your really valuable insights. We may want to look back to this conversation a few years down the road to see actually what we discussed, whether it's happening like this or something else may happen along the way, a few years down the road. So thank you again for Salah and Danisha for joining the Inspiring Energy Talks. Is This is SGS Inspire podcast. Thank you very much for you being here, and see you again in our next episode. And let's keep inspiring.
Thank
Absolutely.
you. Thank
Thank you very
you.
much.
Thank you
Thank you.
both.
Bye bye.
Bye.